The War Council room on Earth was silent, save for the soft hum of holographic displays. Captain Marcus Hale stood rigid at the helm, his eyes fixed on the projection of the Galactic Council's emissary, a looming, multi-eyed creature from the core systems. The message was as clear as it was terrifying. "We will reduce your planet to ashes." The emissary growled, each syllable dripping with venom. Its eyes flickered with cruel amusement as it addressed Earth's War Council. "You have resisted long enough. Now you will know the true power of the Council." Hale's jaw tightened, but he remained silent. Across the table, Lieutenant Zara Cross furiously typed commands into her console, analyzing the incoming data. Her face was pale but focused, her sharp green eyes scanning the projections of the massive alien fleet inching closer to Earth. It was a vast armada, dwarfing anything humanity had ever faced. "They're 3 hours out," Zara whispered, her voice barely above a breath. "Their lead ships have already breached the outer defense grid." The tension in the room thickened. Hale finally spoke, his voice a low, controlled growl. "They underestimate us." His gaze swept the room, locking eyes with each member of the Council, daring them to defy him. "And that will be their downfall." There was no time for speeches. Hale turned to Zara. "Activate the defense protocols. I want every orbital station armed and ready." Zara nodded and complied, her fingers moving swiftly across the console. "Done," she said, her voice steady despite the chaos building around them. "But we're still outnumbered. If they break through—" "They won't," Hale interrupted, his tone cold and certain. "We've prepared for this." A sudden tremor shook the war room as alarms blared. The lights flickered as a holographic display of Earth's outer defenses crumbled, section by section. The alien fleet was already dismantling the satellites and defensive drones that encircled the planet. Zara's eyes widened. "They're moving faster than we calculated." "Let them come," Hale said, cutting her off once more. He turned to the Council, a fire burning in his steel-blue eyes. "They think this is the full extent of our defenses. It isn't." His voice echoed through the room, filling the silence with resolve. Zara glanced at him, momentarily unsure, but the determination on Hale's face was undeniable. This was more than strategy, it was survival. The holographic map showed the first wave of alien ships nearing Earth's atmosphere. The Galactic Council's war machine was relentless, methodical, and merciless. But Hale had a plan that Earth had kept hidden, even from its own citizens. "Prepare the Omega Strike," Hale ordered, his voice a grim whisper. Zara hesitated, her fingers hovering over the control panel. "The Omega Strike? But that would mean—" "I know what it means," Hale snapped, his eyes darkening. "We either use it now, or we lose everything. They've left us no choice." A heavy silence hung in the air as the Council members exchanged uneasy glances. Zara's fingers trembled before she finally keyed in the command. The lights in the room dimmed, and a low hum reverberated through the walls. Hale watched the holographic display, his heart pounding as the alien fleet grew closer. This was it. Earth's last stand. And he would not fail. "They wanted a war," he muttered under his breath. "We'll give them one." The countdown for Omega Strike began, the timer ticking down mercilessly. The war room was a storm of activity. Holographic screens flickered as technicians rushed to analyze the incoming data. Captain Hale stood at the center, a steady pillar amidst the chaos, watching as the alien fleet advanced. Every second brought them closer to Earth's destruction. Zara Cross worked tirelessly at her station, her fingers a blur across the console. Her mind raced as she monitored the fleet's movements, cross-checking the defense grids and recalculating their chances of survival. Despite the tension, her focus remained sharp. She had no choice. The fate of billions rested in their hands. "They're breaching the second defense line," Zara muttered, her voice taut. "Our orbital stations won't hold much longer." Hale's eyes never left the holographic display. He could see it, too, the Council's fleet cutting through their defenses like a scythe through wheat. Yet he didn't flinch. This had always been part of the plan. "Then it's time," Hale said quietly, his voice calm but unyielding. He turned toward the far end of the room, where a panel lay sealed behind layers of reinforced steel. Prepare the Omega strike. The words hung in the air like a death sentence. Every head in the room turned toward Hale, eyes wide with disbelief. Zara froze, her hands hovering over the keys. Captain, are you sure? She asked, her voice barely concealing the fear beneath. Once we deploy the Omega strike, there's no going back. Hale's jaw clenched, but his gaze remained resolute. I'm sure, he replied. This is our only chance. The Omega strike had been Earth's most guarded secret, an untested weapon of mass destruction, designed to be used only in the most desperate of circumstances. Its activation meant risking everything, but against an armada of this scale, there was no room for hesitation. Zara swallowed hard, but her hands moved to execute the command. The panel hissed open, revealing a sleek, obsidian-black terminal. The room's temperature seemed to drop as the hum of the Omega system activated, filling the space with a low, ominous vibration. As the countdown for the weapon began, an eerie silence fell over the room. Hale could feel the weight of every eye on him, questioning his decision, but he refused to waver. He wasn't here to second-guess. He was here to lead, and Earth needed a leader. The tension mounted as the alien fleet entered Earth's upper atmosphere. The holograms displayed hundreds of ships, their sleek designs illuminated by the fires of the crumbling defense stations. Hale could almost feel the heat of their engines, the oppressive force of their presence bearing down on them. Zara's voice broke through the silence. Omega strike online. 5 minutes until full activation. The room shifted. 5 minutes felt like both an eternity and the blink of an eye. Hale's mind raced, replaying the simulations, recalculating their odds. The Omega strike was powerful, yes, but it had never been tested on such a scale. There was no way to know for certain what the outcome would be. Captain, if we miscalculate... Zara's voice trailed off, the unspoken threat clear in the air. The Omega strike wasn't just a weapon. It was a gamble, a roll of the dice that could obliterate Earth as easily as it could save it. We won't, Hale said, his voice firmer than ever. We've planned for this. The Council will never see it coming. The minutes ticked by with agonizing slowness. Zara's hands trembled as she typed, her eyes flicking between the holographic readouts and the Omega system's interface. The alien ships were now close enough that Earth's atmosphere shimmered with the heat of their engines. And then, the alarms blared. Sir, we have movement on the fleet, Zara began, but Hale already saw it. The enemy ships were deploying atmospheric penetrators, small, sleek crafts that would soon rain destruction on the planet below. Hale's heart pounded in his chest. They were out of time. Activate Omega now, he barked. Zara slammed her hand on the terminal. The room went dark for a split second before a brilliant white light engulfed the holographic displays. A sound like the roar of 1,000 storms filled the air as the Omega strike launched into space, hurtling toward the alien fleet. Hale watched, his breath caught in his throat, as the weapon tore through the atmosphere like a spear of light. For a heartbeat, everything was silent. Then, the sky erupted. The alien ships disintegrated in waves of energy, their sleek hulls melting under the unimaginable force. One by one, the massive vessels vanished from the display, consumed by the Omega strike's wrath. Zara stared in awe, her voice barely a whisper. It's working! But Hale didn't move. He knew this was only the beginning. The aftermath and the unseen threat. The room was silent as the last of the alien ships disintegrated into the void. Captain Hale stood motionless, eyes fixed on the holographic display, watching the remnants of the Galactic Council's once dominant fleet fade into nothingness. The Omega strike had worked. Against all odds, they had survived. For now. Captain? Zara's voice was soft, cautious. She looked up from her console, her brow furrowed with a mix of relief and confusion. The fleet, it's gone. Hale blinked, as if snapping out of a trance. His hands unclenched, and he exhaled a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. Yes, he said, his voice low. But don't get too comfortable. This isn't over. Zara frowned. What do you mean? We destroyed them. Hale's gaze hardened, his jaw tightening. That was just their vanguard. The Council isn't foolish enough to send their entire force in one go. They're testing us, seeing how far we'll go to defend ourselves. There's more coming. Zara's stomach twisted. The room, which had briefly felt like a sanctuary after their victory, now seemed cold and oppressive once more. She knew Hale was right. The Council wouldn't accept defeat so easily. They'll regroup, Hale continued, pacing in front of the hollow table. And when they return, they'll be more prepared. We need to be ready. Zara nodded, but a sense of dread gnawed at her. They had barely survived this encounter, relying on a weapon they knew little about. What would they do when the Council sent reinforcements? She glanced at the screen again, the fading debris a grim reminder of the destruction they had unleashed. There's another problem, Zara said after a pause. Her voice wavered slightly, and she hesitated before speaking again. Omega's energy output, it's unstable. The system was never meant to be used at full capacity. We've drained nearly every reserve we have. Hale stopped pacing, turning to face her. How long do we have before the reserves are depleted? A few hours at most, Zara replied, her fingers tapping rapidly across the controls. We'll need to recalibrate, but even then, it might not be enough to power Omega again. Hale's expression darkened. They had expended their greatest weapon, and now they were defenseless against whatever came next. He felt the weight of responsibility pressing down on him, a crushing burden that threatened to break his resolve. We'll have to find another way, he said finally, his voice calm but laced with urgency. Get engineering on it. If we can't use Omega again, we'll need every defense we can muster. Zara nodded, quickly relaying the orders to the engineering team. The room buzzed with renewed activity, the brief moment of relief overshadowed by the looming threat. As the crew worked, Hale's mind raced. There had to be another option. Something they hadn't considered. He couldn't let Earth fall, not after everything they had fought for. A sudden beat from Zara's console pulled him from his thoughts. Captain, she said, her voice tight with concern. We've picked up something, anomalous readings in the upper atmosphere. Hale crossed the room in a few swift steps, leaning over her shoulder to examine the data. His eyes narrowed as he studied the readings. The energy signatures were faint but unmistakable. Is it more Council ships? He asked, though he already suspected the answer. No, Zara said, shaking her head. It's something else. I've never seen these readings before. They don't match any known Council technology. Hale's stomach sank. Something else was coming, something even their intelligence hadn't prepared them for. Put it on the main screen. The holographic display shifted, revealing a faint distortion in the atmosphere, a shimmer, almost like a mirage. It was barely visible, but the energy it emitted was far beyond anything they had encountered. It's moving fast, Zara said, her fingers flying over the controls. At this rate, it'll reach Earth in less than an hour. Hale felt his heart pound in his chest. The Council's fleet had been one thing, but this was something else entirely. An unseen threat, lurking just beyond the edge of their understanding. What do we know about it? Hale asked, his voice tight. Not much, Zara replied, frustration evident in her tone. The energy signatures are completely unfamiliar. I can't even begin to guess what kind of technology we're dealing with. Hale clenched his fists. They were running out of time, and without Omega, they had no way to defend themselves from whatever was coming. His mind raced, searching for a solution, but nothing came. For the first time since the battle had begun, he felt truly powerless. We'll have to face it head-on, Hale said after a long silence. Whatever it is, we can't let it reach the surface. Prepare all remaining fighters, and get me a direct line to the ground defenses. Zara hesitated, her eyes wide with uncertainty. Captain, if this thing is as powerful as it seems... I know, Hale interrupted. But we don't have a choice. The tension in the room was palpable as the crew scrambled to follow his orders. Hale stared at the screen, watching the anomaly grow closer with each passing second. He had always known this fight would push them to their limits, but he hadn't expected it to feel so hopeless. As the final preparations were made, Hale took a deep breath, steadying himself. "We stand our ground," he said, his voice firm. "Whatever this is, we face it together." The unseen threat loomed ever closer, its presence a chilling reminder that their greatest battle had yet to come. The anomaly hung in space like a wound in reality, a shimmering ripple that defied understanding. It pulsed with a strange energy, growing more distinct as it neared Earth's atmosphere. Captain Hale watched it from the command deck, his heart pounding as he struggled to control his fear. The Galactic Council had been predictable in their aggression. This new threat was not. "Fighters are in position, Captain," Zara said, her voice tense as she scanned the latest readings. "But I don't think they'll be enough. Whatever this thing is, it's outputting more energy than anything we've seen." Hale nodded grimly. "I know. But we need to buy ourselves time. We can't let it hit Earth unchallenged." He turned back toward the crew, the weight of responsibility almost suffocating. "Activate all ground defenses. I want every available weapon online and ready to fire." The ship vibrated under the pressure of preparation, a low hum resonating through the floor as weapons systems came to life. The tension in the air was palpable, like the stillness before a storm. "Captain," Zara called out again, this time more urgently. "We're getting visual confirmation. It's not just an energy field, it's a vessel. It's massive." Hale's eyes snapped to the screen as the anomaly began to take shape. The distortion coalesced into a dark, sleek structure, its surface shimmering with a strange, translucent material. It was unlike anything they had ever encountered. No discernible weapons, no visible engines, just a silent, ominous presence gliding through space. "Is it hostile?" Hale asked, knowing the answer wouldn't matter. Even if it wasn't attacking yet, they couldn't afford to wait. "I can't tell," Zara admitted, her fingers flying across the controls as she tried to make sense of the data. "There's no communication, no detectable signals. It's just coming." Hale clenched his fists. He had faced the Council's fleets, their arrogance, and their cruelty. But this? This was something beyond war. It felt like an unknown force, one they weren't equipped to fight. "Send a warning to all stations," Hale ordered. "Prepare for full-scale engagement." The crew moved with the efficiency of seasoned soldiers, but beneath their professionalism, fear lingered. Even Hale could sense the creeping doubt in the air. This wasn't just another battle, it was a fight for survival against something they couldn't understand. As the mysterious vessel drew closer, it emitted a low, resonating hum that vibrated through their systems. Screens flickered, lights dimmed, and a sudden static filled the airwaves. "Captain?" Zara shouted over the rising interference. "It's disrupting our comms. I can't." A deafening roar erupted through the ship, shaking them to the core. The vessel unleashed an unseen force, invisible but devastating. Fighters veered off course, some crashing into each other as the shockwave hit. Ground defenses fired blindly, their targeting systems scrambled. Hale grabbed the edge of the command table, steadying himself as the ship rocked violently. "Return fire! Hit that thing with everything we've got!" The space around the vessel lit up with streaks of light as Earth's defenses unleashed their full arsenal. Missiles soared toward the ship, energy blasts cutting through the void, but as they neared the vessel, they dissipated into nothing. The anomaly absorbed the attacks without so much as a ripple in its surface. "It's not working," Zara breathed, horror spreading across her face. "Nothing's getting through." Hale's mind raced. This was worse than he had imagined. The Council's fleets were nothing compared to this silent, unstoppable force. And yet, even as he faced the enormity of the threat, something inside him refused to surrender. "Redirect all power to Omega," he ordered, his voice cutting through the panic. "If we can't hit it with conventional weapons, we'll have to use Omega again. Captain, the reserves." "I know," Hale snapped, his eyes blazing with determination. "But if we don't stop it now, there won't be a later. Do it." Zara hesitated for only a moment before nodding. She quickly relayed the command, her hands trembling slightly as she worked. Across the ship, lights flickered as systems diverted power to the Omega strike. The weapon had saved them once, but it had nearly drained their resources. This time, it would be all or nothing. Seconds felt like hours as they prepared for the final strike. Hale watched the vessel on the screen, his heart pounding in his chest. It was so close now, too close. If Omega failed, they wouldn't have another chance. "Ready, Captain," Zara said, her voice tight with fear and resolve. Hale took a deep breath, his mind racing through every possible outcome. This was it, their last shot. Fire! A blinding light exploded from the ship, arcing toward the vessel with unimaginable speed. The energy blast surged forward, tearing through space with the full force of Omega's remaining power. The ship rattled, groaning under the strain as every ounce of energy was channeled into the attack. For a moment, everything went silent. The light collided with the vessel, wrapping around it like a shroud. There was no sound, no explosion, just a brilliant, eerie glow. Then, slowly, impossibly, the light began to fade. The vessel remained unscathed. Zara gasped. It didn't. Before she could finish, the vessel responded. A pulse of energy radiated from its core, rippling through the fabric of space-time. The shockwave hit them like a tidal wave, throwing Hale and his crew to the floor as the ship buckled under the force. The last thing Hale saw before the lights went out was the vessel, still approaching, its cold, alien presence indifferent to their struggle. The fight wasn't over. But hope was slipping through their fingers.